Hello, my name's Ed Poole. I'm a Green Party activist and I'm interviewing Green Party candidates for the local elections. Today I'm talking to James Meadway, who's running in Bromley North in Tower Hamlets. Hi James, can you tell us a bit about yourself and why you're standing to be a local councillor for the Green Party?
My name's James. I'm an economist by trade, by background, by academic background. That's kind of my job. But by conviction, I suppose you'd say I'm a socialist, and I've been for a number of years and a campaigner. I'm standing for the Greens in Tower Hamlets because, look, I just think the place could do better. I mean, I first moved here 20 years ago, and moved out away for a bit, and then came back again because me and my family, we really like it here. It's got a huge amount of potential. It's got so much that's going on. It's got this incredible range of different things, this little microcosm of a whole city just contained in the borough here, right? This is quite unique, actually, I'd say, even inside of London. Everyone can say this about their boroughs, of course, I know, but Tower Hamlets has got something special. That's why we moved back here. But it's also somewhere that's got this list of social problems, economic problems, inequality, Canary Wharf, one of the richest spots on the entire planet down the road, and then some of the highest rates of child poverty and deprivation in the entire country, just down the road from it. So you can see these kind of social problems that are here. And what we've had for decades, I would say, probably for as long as I've been living here, is that you have a sort of local political establishment which was Labour and has now gone over to Aspire, which is not serving the people here as well as it could do, right? Labour, we can maybe talk about what the administration was like here. It's going back a bit. Aspire, with the Mayor Lutfi Rahman, it's done a lot of things that people can point to, the mayor himself will point to, but then there's a whole stack of stuff I know from knocking on doors where things aren't working as well as they could do. The council houses that were promised that haven't been built. The fact, it's a simple thing, the fact that Tower Hamlets has the worst rate of recycling in the entire country. And like you can knock on any old door here and people will tell you about the state of the rubbish and litter and this sort of things. It's the attention to detail. It's the transparency in council decision making. We need a council that's going to break with some of the old political structures and institutions and ways of operating here that both Labour and Aspire have tootled along with, and they all enjoy in the council chamber, knocking lumps out of each other, which, by the way, I don't think anyone's greatly impressed by. We need a change at the council. That's what the Greens are talking about here. Same in Tower Hamlets, same in London, same nationally.
Why should people vote for the Green Party?
Couple of reasons on that. I mean, the first one is that I think, particularly here in Tower Hamlets, I'm really proud of the manifesto we put together. That if we get the chance to run the council, this is a programme for serious, substantial changes that will improve the quality of life for people across the borough. It's action on things like the cost of living crisis. We're saying, like Zora Mamdani, Mayor of New York, has just announced that we'll open council-run, owned, operated local grocery stores that will be there to provide high quality but affordable food, in particularly starting off in some of the food deserts that we have out here in Tower Hamlets. Provision for improvements in childcare, improvements in the thing I've just mentioned, like getting onto the fact that this isn't about the people collecting the bins, but it's about the oversight, it's about the systems and the process by which you're getting your bins cleared in Tower Hamlets. A really serious set of proposals, as you'd expect from the Green Party, to be honest, about how that could work better so that we can all go out, open our front doors in the morning and see a much cleaner, greener Tower Hamlets out there. Simple things that will improve the quality of life here. That's kind of why people should be voting for the Greens. We do need a change. We need a change nationally, but we need a change that starts in people's local areas, and that can happen on May the 7th.
One of the economic debates on the left at the moment is around modern monetary theory. On your podcast, Macrodose, you talked about how although the UK can obviously issue currency, because so much of because we import so much and we need other currencies to buy that, and because we have so much debt in other currencies, um, that constrains the amount of spending government can do. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first up, this isn't like something directly relevant for local councils. Like what we've actually seen for local authorities over the last, God, 40 odd years now, that's how long this has been going on for, is that the powers that they used to have, which were never that substantial, you compare like what the Mayor of New York is able to do in terms of raising taxes compared to what local authorities can do in terms of raising taxes on the rich and this sort of thing. All of those powers have been stripped a long time ago. A massive chunk of the amount of spending local authorities have just comes directly from government, and that's given to you. And then there's a big old chunk of that, which is stuff you just legally have to provide, right? You've got statutory duty to provide adult social care and a few other things. So your powers are really quite limited. So the world that you're in as a local authority is one where you are just going to have to fight, in particular, against what national government is doing. So you sometimes get this talk about local authorities setting illegal budgets. This is something you could do in the 80s. That power has been stripped. It's not been there since 1988 and the Local Government Act. It's been removed deliberately by national government to chop off another way in which local authorities can resist what national government is doing. So what we're saying is said, and I'm one of the people standing for election who has signed the pledge that Greens organised initially put together, and the Green Party, I think in general, is taking up, is saying that we're going to stand up to austerity cuts and pressure on funding coming from national government, and we'll do it in an organised way and get everybody elected as a councillor together rapidly after the election on May the 7th to build that campaign to demand for our areas across London, across the whole country, more resources from national government. That's going to be the fight against austerity and the fact that spending cuts have not been restored to local governments over the last few years. Labour hasn't in fact been willing to do this. On the MMT point, modern monetary theory point in particular, this is about what a national government can do. It's true that the British government can issue its own currency if it wants to. It is, in that sense, a sovereign currency issuer, right? The government can, via the Bank of England, or not, actually, if it wants, can issue pounds and it can try and use those pounds to buy things. Basic problem you're up against is that some of the things we need to buy here because of our very privatized, marketized, exposed to the rest of the world economy, we have to buy from the rest of the world. So it's 40% of the food we eat, 50% of the natural gas we burn to keep the lights on and to keep our houses warm in the winter, and 60% of the fertilizer we put on our fields to grow the food we actually do grow here comes from the rest of the world. And you will have to buy those things in the rest of the world in a currency that isn't pounds. So the value of the pound, as far as the rest of the world is concerned, really matters. And if you have a government that says, we're going to issue more and more of these, we're going to change how the government issues its debt, not pay interest on it, these sort of suggestions you get from MMT, the risk is that that value of the pound starts to collapse as far as the rest of the world is concerned, and it's suddenly very difficult to import all this stuff. Now, I think we have to be quite serious and upfront with people about the situation we're in, right? This is an economy that has been badly run for decades now, and the accumulation of those problems includes things like these massive exposures to things going wrong in the rest of the world. So if, for instance, the Strait of Hormuz is closed and the price of natural gas starts to shoot up, we are exposed to that price pretty much immediately because we're importing so much, and we've got a ridiculous sort of privatized, marketized structure domestically to sell the natural gas to people. So these are all the problems that are going to take a long time and hard work to unpick, right? That's what we're up against. And I think we have to be serious with people. I think if you start saying things like some of the MMT kind of suggestions, where it's like it's actually quite easy to do this, I don't think that's right. I think we have to be serious about how are we going to use the resources we have? How are we going to redistribute from the very wealthiest, the really, really rich right at the top, the corporations in this country who are sitting on around about, actually, it's much more than 900 billion pounds in their bank accounts that is not being put to use. What are you going to do about these concentrations of wealth and power so that we can start to actually rebuild and restructure the economy we live in so we're not so exposed to the rest of the world? It's much more equal. We have public services at work and a place we can all be proud to live in.
You've been involved in the launch of a new think tank called Verdant, hoping to work on policy for a just and green future. How do you think the work of think tanks can feed into the kind of democratic member-led policy making at the Green Party?
Well, I think that de democratic member-led policy making that the Green Party have is kind of a secret strength, right? It's unique. I don't think there's other parties, certainly not Labour, that have this real concentration and a deliberate effort put in to make sure that the members remain kind of sovereign in terms of what the party does and what policy looks like. And it's a strength because it means that in practice you can have a broad degree of consensus in the party about what it should be doing. Like the sort of the really deep factional battles you get around Labour aren't present in the same way in the Greens. Doesn't mean there aren't divisions, but they kind of attempt to say, okay, this is like the sort of existential fights that the Labour Party would have. We've seen over the last sort of God, decade and more actually throughout its history, aren't really present in the same way. And newspaper reports about how, there's this kind of a bit like Corbynism. There's going to be this big old fight inside the Green. It's like, I think it's wide of the mark. And part of that strength is because of that commitment to kind of democracy and consensus and member-led processes inside the party. So with all that said, the role of think tanks really ought to be the same as the role of think tanks anyway. It's like you produce the ideas, you produce the policies, you do the research. If people like it, they can take it and run with it and make something of it. And if they don't like it, they won't do that. And that's basically it. There's not much more to this. You know, you can either convince people or you don't convince people. And if you don't convince people, well, tough luck. And if you do convince people, well done. And that's your job done, I suppose. But there's not much more to it.
Verdant recently did a report on government saving money by eliminating unnecessary profiteering in public expenditure. Something Zoran Mandami has been successfully implementing. Um, it sounds quite similar to me to some of the ideas about community wealth building and insourcing and some of the stuff kind of known in this country as the Preston model.
Mhm.
Um, is that something that informs that work and your take on local government?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we reference it directly, like a lot of other local Green parties for these elections. We talk about community wealth building, to use the phrase in our manifesto. And the idea behind this is that you can do something relatively simple, which is to say, look, local authorities spend really significant amounts of money in their local areas on services, on procuring, repairs, on paying for, painting in buildings, all sorts of stuff, right? It's just a great big list of things that local authorities are going to be spending their money on. Um, and if instead of saying, okay, we'll just contract this out to whoever rocks up, whichever big, often sort of privatized provider this might be that'll offer you the service that you need locally. If instead of doing that, you say, we could be directing this big old procurement spend, at least some of it, at least some of that local authority money that they're spending on services that they need to provide locally could go to local businesses and create jobs locally. And we'll take some part of that and spend it so that the money stays in the local area, right? So that's community wealth building. You're building wealth in the community using local authority spending. So that's what councils like Preston, you mentioned, Islington have also done this. There's a few that have picked up on the idea there. And we definitely want to see a major part of our spend in Tower Hamlets Council directing this fashion, right? Because we think it's an important part of saying, particularly in a borough like this, where you have such great kind of inequalities, where you have really massive corporations rocking up and doing their thing down one end of the borough, and at the other end you have like people really living in dire poverty in some cases. In another part of the borough, and local businesses that are struggling because of just general economic circumstances, and you can start to do something that will help that keep that wealth not flooding out somewhere else to some big multinational, but keep it actually in a local community. This has come up, by the way, in a fairly direct fashion just in the last month or so, where JP Morgan, who are at present the world's largest bank, made record profits last year, $43 billion, right? This is Actually, 43 billion pounds, correct myself. Dollars profit, but turn it into pounds. So all-time high profits for them, like every other bank. Interest rates have gone up, they make more money. It's not rocket science, frankly. And they want to open their European headquarters here in Tower Hamlets down in Canary Wharf. And they have asked the government, and the government are going along with this, to say, we do not want to pay business rates. We want to be let off business rates, at least for the first few years, as a little incentive for poor old JP Morgan to open their whacking great new headquarters in Tower Hamlets, right? So, and the local council, it was run by Aspire, a splinter from Labour, notionally kind of, somewhat centre-left, social democratic, are going along with this by the looks of things. They're just not standing up to this stuff. But that's money that this whacking great profitable bank is, because it is so big, because it is so profitable, because it has such a cozy relationship with the Treasury down in Whitehall, can turn around and say, do you know what? Every small business in Tower Hamlets, you run a restaurant, a pub, a shop, you have to pay business rates. If you're JP Morgan, you don't have to, right? That's the antithesis of community wealth building. That is saying you're making these massive profits and we're not even going to take even a bit of it for spending here in this place, which has such inequality and such poverty and deprivation, and we're not going to touch that. It's the very, very opposite of community wealth building. So we want to change that. We want a council that works very differently. They won't just sit there and nod through things like JP Morgan saying, please let us off business rates.
What other issues locally do you think are important?
Few things that come up. One, I know I keep coming back to this, but it matters, right? It matters that you go out on the streets and there's problems of litter and rubbish. It affects you on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to talk about Zohran Mamdani again, because when he in New York, and he did one of his usual brilliant little videos that he puts out about what the administration is up to in its first 100 days. And it was going into things like, let's deal with the potholes in the roads. Let's get rid of, New York has a problem with too much scaffolding, which seems to me like, okay, well, it's not really a problem I can think of. It's particularly in London or in Tower Hamlets, but in New York, they have some buildings where scaffolding has been up for years because of these weird failures of regulation and businesses put it up and it's too expensive to take it down, all that sort of thing. So it's like, okay, we can get rid of the scaffolding. It's an eyesore, right? And these are really small things, but it really affects you on a day-to-day basis. Like it means that when you walk out of your house and down the street, this place doesn't look as nice as it could do because there's rubbish and the litter and the bins aren't being collected properly, and God knows what's going on with the management of that particular service, all that sort of thing. It stacks up. So it's important to get those things right. They're calling it sewer socialism in New York, right? Because it's about getting the fundamentals, the basic building blocks, and saying we're going to do these things properly because that's what you see on a day-to-day basis. Your experience of life is this. So we'll talk about the litter and the bins, and that we have some serious proposals in the manifesto you can go and read to sort that out and get on top of it, make this place much nicer because of that. Housing, another obvious one in Tower Hamlets. It's a chronic problem of affordability on one side. If you're renting, it's a nightmare how expensive this place, like the rest of London, is. It's why the Greens nationally are proposing rent controls. It's why we're going to argue as councillors that this is what we need on a local basis as well. And it's also why we're saying we need an actual commitment to building council houses, because the administration here promised 4,000 council homes. They have not been built. We're going to get them built. There's another thing that's going on, very Tower Hamlets specific. I'm going to flag it because it's kind of interesting and it's going to start to affect other people around the country. This place has more data centres just about than any other London borough. Right? It's about 20 or so that we know about here. It's crammed into Tower Hamlets because of Canary Wharf. So a lot of the banks, big financial institutions want their data centres here. There are so many and they use up so much electricity and water locally that parts of the borough is that you are blocking connections to water and electricity so much that in some parts of the borough it is preventing houses being built for 10 years. There's a 10-year delay in getting houses built, right? And it's actually not just going to be houses, it's going to be anything else you can think of that you might want as a local public service, new nursery, new school, new doctor's surgery, whatever. Gets delayed because the connections are quite limited and the data centres are hogging them all. And so it's a 10-year delay providing that housing, right? That is when you get your priorities wrong. Because those data centers, whatever they're doing for the banks, they're doing nothing whatsoever for the people here other than hogging resources. So one of the things we're saying in the manifesto, which ties directly into what we would want this borough to look like and how we're going to do things differently, is that we're going to freeze applications for data center building. We've got too many of them already. You've got to make a really rock solid case of how that's going to help people here. And frankly, most of the time it ain't going to happen. So we're saying we're going to freeze on building those data centers and prioritize things that people in this borough actually need, which includes that council and social housing that we're going to get built.
My local Labour council, Hertsmere, has just approved the biggest data centre in Europe, about 10
Exactly.
minutes from my front door. So it's something we've got to look forward to here. Um, what do you love about Tower Hamlets?
I sort of touched on this. I mean, I think it's that sense of just something fairly unique being put together here, right? And I've lived here long enough to see how it's happened, which is you have people from absolutely all over the world by background and actually more recent arrivals, lots and lots of people here. And there are all sorts of issues that are connected really to poverty, to be honest, to economic deprivation, to the fact that you haven't had the investment of the kinds that people need in this borough. We've got lots of speculative blocks of flats appearing, but you're not seeing so much that's directly going to help people here in this borough. Lots of stuff for whatever's going on down in Canary Wharf and some of the very, very large companies there, not so much that actually benefits people here. So that's the problem. That's the underlying economic problem in this place. But with all of that, people are building something special, which is a local community that functions in this hugely diverse, imaginative, interesting way where people can come together and actually make something work. And that I think is really special. That is what you're starting to see here. I think everybody else living here will say something like that story. That yeah, you've got problems everywhere, and you can stack them up of the things that aren't as good as they could be in Tower Hamlets. And like I say, I think a lot of that comes back to the economics, the problem of inequality. But on top of that, you've got real community here, the things that people have built, put together over the years, and it works as a collective. And that is a very, very good, important thing.
Right. What's the vision for Tower Hamlets?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I mean, look, if we would end up in government, local government in Tower Hamlets as the Greens, I think if we can implement our manifesto, you'd start to see a borough that was step by step. And I'd like to see this happen from day one. And I think we can do it from day one, improving the experience that people have, most people have, of actually living in Tower Hamlets in a way that your streets are cleaner, your streets are safer. We've sorted out all the issues of low traffic neighbourhoods, poorly implemented, but with the Green Party. So we don't want to see, one of the boroughs, you can't just say just get rid of it when you've got one of the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country in this place, right? You've got to do something about the rates of air pollution. From day one, you start to make a difference on that. And then over time, you do things like put together a community wealth fund. £20 million, we want to set up a pot of money that will be, its allocation were decided by local people. So this is participatory budgeting. You get people in and say, here's a big old pot of cash that we can use to improve the borough. And we're going to get that money from chasing down the little pots of cash that the council at the minute isn't effectively using. Put it together and start saying, what can we invest in on a local basis that will start to turn this place around? Those community supermarkets, good quality, affordable food that is provided in the places that people need it. Places that the big supermarkets are otherwise potentially quite cheap, but they're not open to Tesco's in the food desert in Tower Hamlets, right? So you can't get that cheap, let alone high, good quality food. We're going to make that happen. You can start to put these things together, a right to grow, taking some of the, and I find it probably, you walk around, you see it. There are places that are just not used. Like the price of land here is through the roof, and there are parts of the borough that are just sort of disused. So we're going to have a right to grow and start saying to people, what can you do to turn those disused places into something that's actually of value to the community here? You're going to localize decision making. You're going to think about what it is that people want. What is your experience? You go out the front door and you look around, what do you see? How do you feel about where you live? If in the space of 4 years or so you can turn that around, that's what a green Tower Hamlets could start to look like.
How can people get involved in your campaign?
Couple of things really. Go to the website, Tower Hamlets Green Party, .org.uk. I've got that right. But do Google it in any case, and you can sign up for some of the regular canvassing sessions that we got across the borough. So you'll be able to find somewhere close to you where we're out pretty much, it is every evening and every weekend now until the election. The polling nationally for the Greens is spectacular. Like we've never had it so good. The polling in London is, if anything, even better. I've seen some experimental modelling for like what it looks like in Tower Hamlets on a ward by ward basis, and it looks pretty good. But I have to say, I do not trust opinion polls, and I don't trust modelling, and I don't trust anything other than the fact that we've had those conversations with people and we've persuaded people and convinced them that they can come out to vote on May the 7th and really change how this borough works. It could be something spectacular. We know this across London. It could be a spectacular shift in the politics of the whole capital at the very least. If there's that green wave that the opinion polls are talking about and that I know people campaigning out there are starting to see in the doorstep, if that happens, that is a seismic change in politics in Britain, not just in London, for the whole country, because the whole country will be watching. And Tower Hamlets can be part of that. And if you live locally and you want to come and help out, sign up, get yourselves out, and it'll make a real difference on the day.
James, thanks very much.
Thank you.